Welcome everyone to the finals of the Champions Chess Tour 2025, the chess.com classic here. Magnus Carlsen arrives a bit late to the game. His opponent, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, is super zoned in and he'll be looking to beat Magnus. It'll be best of 4 encounter here and the game has started. Let's have a look at the game and let's go. So the game has begun with Magnus with the white pieces opening with 1 e4, c5, knight to f3, d6, knight c3, knight f6, h3 played here. Knight comes out to c6 and Magnus pushes his pawn to d4. We have the open Sicilian with a little move h3 played here and MVL cannot settle into his favorite Najdorf. Pawn to e5 and the knight goes back to f3. H6 played, stopping the bishop from coming to g5. The knight can now jump in to d5. d5 square is a bit weak, but MVL quickly comes and defends it. The bishop drops back. Bishop comes out to e7. White castles, black castles here. It's a very typical Sicilian position. Rook e1 played by Magnus, just making sure that d5 is not easily possible. The e5 pawn is under pressure. Now black can actually jump to a5, put pressure on the bishop. He goes rook c8. Is Magnus now going to jump into d5? Maybe that's the reason why he played rook e1 on the previous move, defending the pawn on e4 here. You can see here MVL looking super relaxed. Magnus now is thinking he has 9 minutes on the clock. He plays his knight to d5. The knight now attacks the bishop on e7. And also, it's a question. Black cannot take knight takes d5 as e takes d5 would fork 2 of the pieces. Maybe now bishop d5 makes the most sense. MVL takes it. Bishop takes. Magnus thinking whether he should take with the bishop or with the pawn. He takes with the pawn. E takes d5. Knight jumps to a5. The position super comfortable for black. Magnus, will he get outplayed by MVL here is the question. And now after knight a5, Magnus goes bishop a4. The knight jumps to d7. It's already a very good position for Magnus. Actually, MVL should have gone knight c4 here. That was much better. But instead, he went knight d7, allowing Magnus now to play his bishop back to the c2 square, taking this long diagonal. f5 played, and bishop comes back to c2. Magnus understands that this position is really good for him. There could be tactics around taking the pawn here and then pushing forward with the d pawn. Many possibilities here. And if e4 is played by black, then the knight will jump to d4 looking at the e6 square. So Magnus already looking sharp, looking good in this position. And it's really amazing how from any particular position, Magnus is able to put a lot of pressure on his opponents. What is MVL going to do next is the big question here. As Magnus adjusts himself in the chair, right now knight can jump to c4, but then there can be b3 followed by c4 in the position. So you can see here b3, the knight has to go back, and c4, and this looks like a great pawn chain here for white. MVL is thinking for his move. He's now down to 7 minutes 23 seconds. He goes queen b6. This is not at all a great move here. There could be knight d4 ideas already because the bishop on e7 is undefended. Don't know how this position will pan out. So like knight d4, pawn takes, and then rook e7 attacking the knight. Yeah, this does look very suspect, and I think white is clearly better there. So maybe Magnus finds this move knight d4. No, he goes rook to b1. It's not the best move, but it's not at all bad. Because now I'm going to go b3 later, or maybe just get the bishop out, and the pawn on b2 is no longer hanging. In fact, he goes rook f7, and now if Magnus finds this incredible move here, I would be stunned. You know what? G4. This is just crazy, because the point is, after take, you open up the diagonal for your bishop, you go maybe queen d3 next, you go rook e4, you're playing on the light squares. You can also go bishop f5, bishop e6. So if Magnus does find g4, that would be huge. But this position is so good that there are many good options available. You can see Magnus thinking about his move carefully there, and he goes a4. That's very logical. The queen goes back to c7, and sooner or later, maybe g4 becomes a very important move to play, because this is the unopposed bishop that white has in the position, the bishop on c2. Somehow Magnus not really happy there with his position. It seems the bishop on c1 maybe not a great piece right now, but it's doing a lot of job on that diagonal. MVL has had such an amazing run in this tournament. He beat Hikaru Nakamura to reach here. And if he needs to beat Magnus Carlsen, he not only has to beat him in this encounter, but he also has to beat him in the next one, because he's come from the losers bracket. And so he has to beat Magnus twice. G4 on the board. Can you believe it? G4 played by Magnus Carlsen, and this just goes to show what tremendous understanding Magnus has. Amazing positional understanding of the game, and he has now rook f8. He's doubled the rooks here, and he wants to threaten to take the knight, but queen d3 is just a massive move here. It's just Let's just have a look at this variation. Queen d3, rook takes f3, queen h7 check, king f7, bishop g6 check, king f6. You almost have gotten the king out, and now after bishop h5, there's just no way to stop queen g6 mate. That's the amazing line that Magnus has to calculate here, and I'm pretty sure he will do it, because he did the hard work there, finding the move g4, and now the next queen d3 move is not at all tough. There you see Magnus looking at the screen carefully. He did win the first edition of Champions Chess Tour. Oh, look at him with this huge glass. And now he's also looking to win. Queen d3 on the board, and Amruta, rook takes f3 has been taken. Queen h7, king f7, and now Magnus has to finish off this game. What are your thoughts, Amruta, on the move g4?
It was incredible that he found it.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable.
It was also
King
difficult to face
f6.
it.
Now this is on the board. Can Magnus find the finishing stroke? There are many ways. In fact, even bishop f5 is a beautiful move. Magnus is thinking here. 5 minutes 33 seconds for Magnus, 6 minutes 12 seconds for MVL.
Wow, but getting the king out in the garden and then checkmating him in the first game.
Yeah, bishop h5 found, and MVL about to resign. You can see him there. He's almost going to end this game. And he resigns. Magnus Carlsen wins here. What a victory for Magnus Carlsen. He is showing why he is the greatest player on the planet right now. That g4 move followed by the mate was so good. Magnus checking the game. MVL really unhappy because he got a great opening position. It was just that later on he couldn't really hold his own. And Magnus Carlsen, once again, we want to show you this moment where he goes g4. What a move. He sees that this entire diagonal means much more than the weakening along the f file. And this fantastic game is worthy of deeper evaluation. Welcome everyone to the second game of the match between MVL and Magnus Carlsen. This is the first game ended in Magnus's favor. We are now into the second game. MVL will be looking for his revenge. Let's see how this game has started. So, with the white pieces, MVL begins with 1 e4. Magnus plays the Sicilian, knight f3, knight c6, pawn to d4, and now g6. We have the accelerated dragon on the board. Pawn to c4, the Morozzi bind, bishop g7, bishop e3, and queen b6. Magnus really playing these sharp lines, attacking the pawn on b2 and d4. The knight jumps to b5, attacking the queen. Queen a5 check, knight comes back, knight to f6, threatening to take the pawn, knight d2, breaking the pin here. And now this is the live board position that we have right now. Magnus has currently 9 minutes 13 seconds. MVL has 9 minutes 29 seconds. Bishop comes to e2. Bishop to e2 played here by MVL, and Magnus has to decide how to continue here in this position. Should he castle here? That seems like a normal natural move. The other idea is to play knight to d7 and come to c5. That's another possibility. And Magnus also snacking at the same time. He's playing, he's snacking. And this time the opening hasn't particularly gone in his favor. We all know what MVL is capable of. Knight d7 played. Yes, bishop takes c3 was an option there, but rook c1 immediately defending the knight. It might be a bit too greedy and risky to go after the pawn on a2. I mean, you could even just completely be lost after queen c1 with the idea of rook a3 trapping the queen. So I think you shouldn't really be capturing that knight on c3, but you can see how much time Magnus is burning right now. He castles. Short castle here by MVL as well. And now Magnus, well, the c4 pawn could be attacked, let's say by knight e5 or something, but it's well protected. He goes back queen d8. It's passive. I think white has gotten a great position out of the opening. f3 perhaps makes a lot of sense. And then you slowly try to play. Oh, he goes f4. MVL does not hide his aggressive intentions. b6 by Magnus. That's the reason why he got his queen back. He wants to put his bishop on this long diagonal. Let's see what MVL continues with in this position. He goes queen e1, bishop goes to b7, queen to f2, and now should we go to knight c5, because then the knight is quite well placed, and then you can even go back to e6 to enter on the d4 square. He goes rook c8 with the idea of knight a5 to c4 and rook f d1. Speed of MVL insane. 8 minutes 44 seconds to him. Just 7 minutes 3 seconds for Magnus. And I like actually White's position overall with all the space. Amruta, you are a big Sicilian expert and a Sicilian fan. Do you like White's position here?
Yeah, maybe white would have had better ways to continue, but knight c5 now is a nice piece. a3, I think he wants to kick it away with b4.
Yes, he definitely wants to play b4, and Magnus stops it with a5, rook b1. MVL wants to reshuffle his rooks. One rook here, the other here. But now Magnus has gotten this golden opportunity to take the knight here and double the pawns. But instead he pushes forward with a4. And he actually stops the idea of b4 completely.
Yeah, forever.
But actually, he has sacrificed a pawn, which might be very poor. Take, take, and now you have no time to take the pawn on a4 because of
Bishop d4. There's the spin
absolutely.
here.
You lose the queen. So a4 played, and now MVL goes bishop g4. e6 played here by Magnus Carlsen, stopping. Once again, if we see, Magnus started off with an inferior position, but just after 19 moves, he's once again gotten the advantage. I don't know how he manages to do it.
If you
It's
think about White's pieces in Sicilian now, they do not seem in harmony.
Yes, they are not in harmony. Meanwhile, black will go queen e7, have the ideas of f5. The knight on c5 is looking at these squares. The knight on c6 is looking at the dark square. The bishop is on a beautiful diagonal. It's like a dream position for black. And MVL
Now
once
White
again.
doesn't have any good move
Yes,
to improve his pieces.
he slowed down. And that's what happens. You play quickly, you land up in not such a great position, then you try to use your time, but it's sometimes too late already.
And maybe the prophylactic move King h1 would be necessary at
Well,
some
he goes
point.
bishop f3. He comes back, he defends the pawn on e4, and now Magnus can jump on a5 with the knight. I like this knight jump because you're preparing the knight coming to b3. You're also putting a lot of pressure on c4. You're also opening up your bishop. He goes e5. And maybe not a great move by Magnus, because now MVL can push forward with f5. And he finds it. And Magnus jumps in with this knight. That was his plan. That is the reason why he played e5. He wanted his knight to jump into the center. Now maybe bg4, Amruta, is the move.
And then there's
Oh, he
h5.
finds it. He finds bg4. Oh, h5. But isn't that playing with fire? I'll come back with my bishop. Your king looks a bit weakened. Very interesting position building up here. The game can go either way. Very important for MVL to win this, because if he loses this game, then he will be 2-0 down in the match, which will be super difficult to actually come back. Yes, the knight on d3 is looking there. h5 found by Magnus. And after bishop h3, which is kind of, I think, the forced move.
But you're committing to stay on that diagonal and then weakening some squares forever.
But Amruta, if you go bishop f3, you will definitely have to take into consideration pawn takes, and then this pawn
Knight
could
f3.
become weak. Yeah, even bishop f3, and yeah, it's a complex position there. Let's see, after h5, what move does MVL come up with? For now, he's thinking 6 minutes 14 seconds for him. Let's have a look at a zoomed in view of the players to just get a feel. And look at them, super focused, completely into the game.
In fact, White has one move which Black should consider f6.
Oh
Oh,
my god, Amruta! What sharp thinking! He's actually played it, but now what happened after f6 was, after I take, Magnus has assessed this so well that this position is better for him after queen f6. I can't believe it. Because of the dark squares that he has in the position.
and look at the pawns, the e4, the c4. They all look weak.
Yeah, they are weak. And the e5, these two squares are great outposts for the black pieces. The knight already can't be dislodged, can't be bothered. Queen e5 looks like an incredible move, but very difficult to make, especially when your d6 pawn is hanging. He takes on d4, which is logical. Rook takes d4, and now rook f e8. So if MVL chops off the pawn on d6, then Magnus will chop off the pawn on e4
Rook b6.
and will be slightly better after takes, knight takes attacking the rook, pawn takes, and then I simply drop my bishop back. And even though I'm a pawn down, this position with my active rooks and the active bishop is very strong. So let's see how this game goes about. I think MVL must defend the e4 pawn even further with knight g3 defending here. 5 minutes each for both sides. Yes, this one is going to be a very, very even game. Can go in any direction as of now. I think the problem here is that if you go knight g3, I'll go rook e6. Oops, rook e6. defending the pawn and threatening to double to attack the e4 point.
And the g4 pawn looks very annoying.
For whom?
For white. Oh, he
Oh, he
takes on d6
takes.
and goes into the forcing variation.
Bishop e4 by Magnus. He doesn't take with the knight. He takes with the bishop. He prefers to keep his knight on the board. He's attacking the rook on b1. Knight takes, but now rook takes. Oh, he takes with the knight and rook takes c4. b3 quickly played here by MVL. He didn't want his pawns to be clamped down. He pushes his pawn, but now ab3 is possible.
Can white's rook pawn be dangerous?
Oh yes, white's pawn rushing down the board can be super dangerous here.
But look at the white king. It's going to be pretty weak.
Yes, that's a great point actually. After ab3, let's say rook takes b3, already with rook jumping into c1 and the knight looking at f2, knight coming to d2, it's very dangerous. Magnus here after b3 takes the pawn and he takes back with the rook on b6, f5 played. It's a mini edge for Magnus, but it might not be a huge one. I think the game very likely can end in a draw here.
There can be a very cool idea if black gets by any chance such a check. And if this knight is not there, then you have to be careful for the mating ideas.
Wow, that's a great one. Rook c2 played here by Magnus. You can see him sensing that he has his chances. You know, if you play a4, Amruta's idea of f4, f3, f2 does come into the picture. You'll also be attacking the g2 pawn. Right now plays a4. Oh, and Magnus goes knight d2. Why didn't he play f4? Because knight d2, that doesn't look great. Because now you can just take. He goes rook e3, which is even better. And he's managed to now equalize the game, it seems. Because if you move your rook away, I might just play rook e2. Yeah, look at this line. If I go rook b8, rook e2,
This
pinning
move?
here. If you give me a check, I come up to f2, defending my rook. So rook e3. And here Magnus may do well to just draw the game here. I think trade. But if you trade, you're already in trouble, yeah, with a pawn being very strong. So you have to be a bit careful here as Magnus. He goes rook c8. 3 minutes 30 seconds for MVL. 3 minutes 25 seconds for Magnus.
a5 does look interesting.
Yeah. Definitely a5 is very powerful. By the way, you should remember that rook c1 could be an idea to pin the knight on the first rank.
Ooh, a5 is a blunder.
Not really well. a5, rook c1, there is rook e1 back and it's safe. So it's playable. But MVL taking his time, rightly so. He goes rook e2, there comes a check, king comes to f2. And Magnus takes on h2. Wow, what a move.
It's
What
happening.
a move.
Oh, beautiful.
Because
Knight
if you
h2.
take rook c2 is a check. And if you take knight takes, there is g3, an incredible resource found by Magnus here. And after king f3, maybe you want to take the knight here. Wow. MVL is stunned, I must say. Let's just have a look at him. He definitely looks under a bit of pressure. He takes on c2, takes, king comes back. And he thinks that this position should be holdable with the rook blocking the pawn. But Magnus now has 3 versus 1 here. And the engines assess this as equal. Yeah, if the king tries to come out from here, the white king can enter from the other side. And if Magnus plays king g5 with the idea of f4, I can stop it with the move rook a4. So yeah, very likely the game is going to end in a draw. King e5, king h4 played. Maybe he'll go back. Oh, he goes ahead. Well, Magnus has some other ideas here. g3 has to be careful here because he can't go and win the pawn, right? Takes. If he takes king g6, there's f4. Wow, can he not take this pawn? Take, take, take. If king takes, f4 wins for black. So yeah, he has to keep the rooks on the board. And now jumping in with his king. Well, MVL has to be super careful here. Yes, rook f1. Brilliant move. Cutting the king off. But again, you can't take the pawn because rook takes, and king f3. It's winning for black. But maybe all that he wants to do is put his rook on f4. Yes, correct. No, he's not going to take it. And this game is going to end in a draw now. I pretty much think that the players are going to agree to a draw. King takes, rook takes. What a game here by both the players. It's a draw. 1.5 half lead for Magnus as MVL gets up. Magnus puts on the headphones to speak with the arbiters that if there is a break of how many minutes, we'll be back with game number 3. Welcome to game number 3. Magnus will now have the white pieces, and if he manages to win this, he will win the title. Let's head over to the board and see what's the opening Magnus has chosen. In game 1, he went e4, but now he goes d4. MVL responds with knight f6, c4, g6 by Magnus, and knight comes out to c3. MVL plays his favorite Grunfeld, knight to f3, bishop g7, and we already have Magnus thinking here about what his next move is going to be. He takes. Will he play the main line e4? Yes, he does. Pawn takes, pawn to c5 by MVL. Well, Grunfeld is a very theoretical opening. And the thing is, white can enforce the draw in many ways here and play a very safe position sometimes. Like here, he can take on c6 because there's a lot of pressure on d4, by the way, to take here. And let's see how Magnus reacts here. He can also push his pawn to d5. That's also a viable way to play here. Or bishop e3, but then that is met with bishop g4. It'll be interesting to see what Magnus's sort of game strategy here is because he is leading in the match. He could play like risk free here and draw the game and then make MVL play for a win in the final game here. Bishop g4, good move, pinning the knight. This is the entire concept of the Grunfeld, that you put pressure on white central pawn on d4. Here you have the pressure on the knight, you have pressure on d4 by the pawn, knight and the bishop, and also the queen. And maybe here the right way for white to continue could be to just take on c6 or to push d5, pawn to d5, knight e5. I go back with my bishop, knight takes f3, bishop takes f3, bishop f3, queen f3, bishop c3, rook a b1, attacking here, b6, and this can be an interesting position with a lot of compensation here. Take, queen takes c3, white would be better. So these are some lines that could happen. And he does go d5. Magnus does push his pawn to d5. MVL does play knight e5. Are we going to witness this? He goes knight e, bishop e2. Are we going to witness this line happening? And now knight takes f3 makes sense. Because if you take bishop f3, I can very well take with my pawn, not allowing you to trade any more pieces and then push you away with f4. So here, maybe very important to take with the knight on f3. So you can see there Magnus Carlsen, fully focused. MVL also completely zoned in here. And while we were looking at that line, like let's say knight f3, bishop f3, bishop f3, queen f3, bishop c3, attacking the rook, rook a b1, b6, bishop c5, I can just simply go back bishop g7. And that also seems to be a good position for black. So after bishop e2, MVL is made to think he takes on f3, bishop f3. We are heading into that line. And now will Magnus go rook b1 or rook c1 or rook d1? Many different options here for Magnus. He goes rook b1, b6, and I'm pretty sure he takes on c5, rook c8. Oh, that's a great move. Because now if queen takes c3, I can go rook c5, and already black is the one who's pressing here. Because imagine I go queen d3, queen d6, I take over the c file, and I have a queenside majority here. So maybe the best move now is bishop a3. He finds it. Of course, Magnus will find all the best moves here. This is the kind of position which is a bit nightmarish against Magnus. Also, considering the tournament situation, it's not a very happy position for MVL, I must say, because he's a point down. He needs to score back a point, while with black, he has hardly any chances here. Rook bc1, bishop goes back to e5. And how is Magnus going to try here? G3 played. Can we go a5 with the idea of b5, b4? That's possible just to expand your queenside pawns. Magnus would be looking to somehow plonk his rook on the c6 square if it's possible, then double down the c file. But that's not happening right now. Let's have a quick look at the players. Super focused, super determined there, both of them. Takes on c1. Well, that was slightly weird. f5, MVL fighting for the full point here, I guess. f5, and his point is clear. If you take on f5, I'm going to take with the rook. Your f2 point could potentially become a weakness. But it also weakens the king here. We already see that the bishop is putting pressure on e7. He goes rook c6. And now, do we go fe, queen e4, queen f5, or can we go rook f6 here? Maybe can MVL just push his pawn forward with f4? But that's not a good idea, because then queen b3 threatening d6, and that becomes quite nasty here. So rook c6. Now you can see Magnus smiling somehow. What's the joke, Magnus? Not so sure. He's having a good time. I think Magnus in general has a lot of fun playing these events because he loves chess. I think the only thing which he dislikes about chess is the opening preparation part, which he's done for 5 world championship matches, and perhaps it's taken a toll on him. Fe, queen takes e4. It's kind of forced. And now already Magnus having a big advantage after bishop d6. The best move here for black was queen f5, putting pressure here. But bishop d6, what could be more natural than to prevent the bishop and the queen putting pressure on the e7 point here? He has stopped it, but now after, let's say, bishop d6, which Magnus will most likely play, e takes d6. This one is a bit nightmarish position because I go king g2, a4, h4. There are multiple ways to improve the white position. Do you think Amruta Magnus is going to win this tournament now? Because this win and it's all over. Magnus eating something there. I wonder what he's having. Maybe he likes. Can't see it properly. What he's eating. It's also his move. He takes, pawn takes, h4 played, rook to e8. And now there's a small tactic here. Can you guys find it before Magnus executes it on the board? It's called deflection. Yes, the queen is defending the rook. So you take rook d6, queen d6, and queen takes e8. So
Queen and games and Magnus.
okay, that's just completely lost. If you go into a queen endgame, you can resign here after queen c6 because this pawn is super strong. So after rook d6, he might have to go into a rook endgame, but even that looks completely lost because not only are you pawn up, you also have cut your opponent's king. You have a d-passer. I think Magnus just evaluating this, takes here. Magnus Carlsen is on course to winning this. Now, king g2, bring the king in. It's always useful. One of the things that inexperienced players keep committing errors is that they try to rush into it. But Magnus here, very likely to go king g2, king f3, king e3, get the king into the game, and that would put even more pressure on the opponent, especially because you have his king cut off. Yes, king g2 on the board. Magnus, the endgame maestro. He goes king g2 and he looks comfortable there. a5 pushed and king f3. King comes up b5, king e3. Pretty sure his king is going king e4 now. He goes rook d1, king e4, and now rook d2, attacking this both these pawns. Have to be a bit careful here. How do you continue? But essentially, white is winning. Maybe pawn to if you save f3, you lose the key pawn on a2. So maybe you can give up the f2 pawn and then just go rook b7, and with your d pawn rushing down the board, it should be completely winning. So here is where I've always been impressed by Magnus's play. See, he just understands what is more important. He plays a3. He just got it that this pawn is key, and now, well, rook b4, rook f2 possible, b4 pawn push or a4 pawn push. Let's see. He takes on f2, and now d6, or do you go rook b7? I like rook b7. Great move by Magnus. Because if you go rook b2 to defend, I go d6, and once you come back, I go king e5. It's just that all of white's pieces are so well coordinated. Everyone is playing. Meanwhile, black's king completely cut off. MVL very close now here to throwing in the towel here. He might be looking at some ways to create some play, maybe some check. He goes b4, ab, d6 pushed, rook d2, king e5, king f8, and now rook takes b4 by Magnus. He's doing it in style. He's winning this comfortably here. It's clear that Magnus is just the best in the world. MVL shaking his head. We might as well see resignation very soon. And another 100 points going the way of Magnus Carlsen. Remember, guys, this tournament is the qualifier for Esports World Cup. For now, Magnus already won the first Champions Chess Tour event, got 100 points. He'll win this and get another 100 points. Now king goes, and there are no more checks. He plays his pawn to h5, but now just rook f4. Cut the king off and play king d8, d7, and should be winning easily. He goes king d8 here, rook e3, d7. He takes the pawn, I believe. Check to the king. King g7, and now rook d4 should do the job.
Lucena.
Because yes, it's a Lucena here, but even easy version of Lucena. So now I just come out with my king from any side here, and MVL will resign here. Magnus Carlsen wins, and there you see he's won the event here. He's won the match. 2.5 half. Well, What a great performance there by Magnus Carlsen. He not only wins this match with MVL, he also wins the tournament. Hats off to the GOAT.